The conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board waded into the debate over Representative Liz Cheney, warning House Republicans that an internal feud over her criticism of former President Trump could jeopardize potential gains in the 2022 midterms. Before we even read this, I find it very comical that they're saying this, just this sentence alone, um, because the Democrats have these very slim, itty bitty majorities in both the House and Senate. They have a couple of seats over the Republicans in both chambers. So just the idea that, oh man, we have to coalesce or else we're going to not win this election that is only slightly difficult to win if the Democrats are even performing at their best. Like if they were, let's say it was 60 Democratic senators and 40 Republicans, I would go, okay, yeah, that they need to buckle up. But just like one or two seats, they flip it and they have the majority. Oh man, we need to get together. This should be a hopeful moment for House Republicans. While they're playing defense in the minority for now, their prospects for picking up the 5 net seats they need to regain the majority in 2022 are excellent. That is, unless they devolve into internal brawling over the 2020 election. The Journal's editorial board wrote Tuesday, "Yes, that's precisely what they seem to. Yet that's precisely what they seem to be doing." As some members tried to oust Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney from the Republican House leadership, the editorial board argued, Cheney has found herself in the middle of a Republican fight. Okay, I'm not gonna. They're reiterating information. Purging Liz Cheney for honesty would diminish the party, the Journal editorial board said. They wrote it, but they said it somehow. The editorial board's comments come as Cheney battles mounting calls for her to be kicked off her perch as the number 3 House Republican over her criticism of Trump. Most recently, Cheney called out Trump for propagating the big lie that the election was fraudulent, fueling further criticism that her feud with Trump is highlighting divisions within the party. The criticism culminated in a hot mic comment from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who was heard saying, "I've had it with her. I've lost confidence," before noting that someone in his conference would introduce an internal resolution to remove her from leadership. Let's see here. The Journal's editorial board urged McCarthy, Cheney, and other Republicans to pivot their focus away from battles with Trump and toward President Biden's agenda, which has garnered nearly unanimous opposition as the Republicans rail against the price tag of infrastructure and other plans. Republicans should find a way to speak this truth to voters in 2022 and quickly turn to running on an agenda for the future that will check Mr. Biden in his cradle-to-grave entitlement state, wrote the editorial board. The reason this is significant is because you usually don't see, even though this is a conservative outlet, these types of defenses for politicians that aren't the president or presidential candidates. Like I can't think of someone that's not maybe AOC that had an editorial written about them where they talked about how they need to come together and stop being attacked over and over again. Because really, the only time I saw anybody write anything about Collins or Murkowski is if they had some very significant vote that people were demonizing them over. But it's really fun to watch them say that they need to pivot to their focus away from battles with Trump. How can you do that when you have a president who, in his last couple of weeks, was seen as having incited an incident that could have resulted in the death of multiple prominent politicians? Over a misinformation campaign of spreading a lie that he had won an election, and that person who did that refuses to disappear, does not go into exile, does not shut up. So, what's a good way of saying it? I think if he has the right to keep making comments that I guess offend Cheney or she otherwise doesn't like, I think she has the right to respond back to him in whatever manner that she wants. And I'm actually really disgusted by McCarthy because they sit here and they have this vote after Cheney first came under fire back in January for speaking negatively of Trump following the riot. And in the vote, she gets to retain her seat. And it's established that these votes keep you in that position for the usual 2-year House term. But we're not even halfway through the first year of this term, and he's talking about, I'm sick of her, and we're possibly going to introduce a resolution to get... Yeah, that's very democratic. Let's vote to keep this person for 2 years. Then, because they've said some things we don't like, less than a quarter into their term, we're going to throw you out, or we're going to try to throw you out through another means. That's that's some great democracy for you. No, I have no respect for him. He's just a complete coward. Like, oh, boo-hoo, she's saying negative things about the president from your party. Just say you don't agree and move on. Like, I don't understand this weird. That's why I said that. It, to me, it just seems as if when you have someone like her who did criticize Trump in the past on various issues, even on things that I agreed with him on, like the North Korea summit, and that person was allowed to disagree. They might have gotten some insults from people on the computer, but largely they were allowed to have disagreements. And now that they're holding his feet to the fire for spreading a misinformation campaign that incited what was a deadly riot that could have been deadlier had it not been for uh, law enforcement showing up. Oh, now you're speaking too much out of term and we're tired of you. I just think it's really screwed up, and I don't like to agree with these types of outlets, but like I'm forced to defend the politician I don't even like because I think the criticisms that they're getting are not justified and are from a bunch of sycophants who will let Trump get away with anything. Like the politicians that aren't calling him out or didn't call him out didn't do that because they genuinely believe the riot was a great thing or good thing for democracy, but because they want to keep their jobs. And he has a bunch of supporters on the computer who just seem to be okay with this style of, I don't even know what this is. It's insane to me. But that was my point, that I find this story very interesting because they're admitting the Republicans don't have to do that much to keep these House seats, to get these House seats and flip the House back for their side. But they're also like, well, you guys need to make sure you team up so that you can get these couple of House seats that will switch the majority. If I were them, I'd be worried about actually making some big inroad. Like, to hell with getting 5 seats, let's get 50 seats, so it doesn't keep flipping back and forth over and over. But that's how they roll.